Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our career competitive series, Careers Beyond Academia. This is one of my all-time favourite workshops because it's often the one where we get a lot of light bulbs going off. So thank you for joining us. Those of you who are in the session today, can we please get you to write your student ID number into the chat so we can mark you as attended? But we are recording. We will upload the recording and the resources later this week, probably tomorrow, if that's all right with you. So we will get started. So, of course, the first and most important thing for me to do is to acknowledge our traditional owners. So I would like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people, who are the traditional owners of the lands in which QUT now stands. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits, and we acknowledge that these lands have always been lands of teaching, learning, and research, which is the one that's important to us. My name is Karen Carvu. I'm the HDR Career Educator here in GRED, here to help both HDRs and ECRs in moving to careers outside of academia, if that's what you would like to do. So let's start off with a disclaimer. Today is not about telling you what job to apply for or telling you what jobs are available in your specific field. There are countless fields. There are many, many schools, and I am not a discipline-specific expert. That is not what I'm employed here to do. I am here as an HDR career expert. I have 15 years experience in career counselling and career coaching. So I know how to help with careers, but it's not appropriate that we break into really discipline-specific conversations. So if that's what you're here for, my suggestion is that you talk to your faculty or your school about that in particular, but I am here to give you a grounding of how to do this research for yourself. And I actually think it's much more important to do that. So what today is about for you and from my perspective is fundamentally to give you the tools, the strategies, and the awareness and the resources yourself to shape your own career exploration. So as researchers, this is something that is well within your wheelhouse. You just need to know what the resources are and where to start, right? I'm here to help you understand the range of jobs that do exist outside academia, what they're called, where to find them, and what language you need to master, and how to engage in industry experiences to help you build that industry capital that you will need for jobs outside of academia. Because it's a relatively small group, if there are any questions as we go, please feel free to add it into the chat or to unmic. Ideally, turn your video on so I know who I'm speaking with and ask your questions. There will be time at the end for a big lot of questions, but if you've got a burning question as we go, please feel free to do that. So why does this workshop come about? Well, we need to mind the gap. In 2019, research was conducted into the top PhD employers by AMSI and CSIRO. One critical statistic was that although about half of those current PhD students who were surveyed wanted to work in industry, the forecast was that less than a quarter will find themselves being employed in academic roles. Now, that means there's an expectation gap of more than a quarter of all PhD grads who thought they'd be working in academia, but possibly won't be. What I'm trying to do for you today is not to scare you off any potential career path, inside or outside academia. It is just to make you aware that there is a huge range of options for you, what they're called and where to look for them, so that you keep as many irons in the fire as you choose. Okay, so when we talk about industry, first of all, what do we mean when we talk about industry? Well, no, we don't mean manufacturing, although in a lot of sectors and in disciplines, that is what it means, right? So no, it doesn't equal manufacturing. Different terms like this mean different things within different fields. So put your discipline context aside and embrace the idea that in this context, for research roles, industry just means non-academia. It literally means everything but academia. Okay, so alt-ac might actually be a better term, but because most of the supports around jobs and internships use the term industry, we're just going to get used to that, okay? So you are now looking for academic and or industry roles. So let's just embrace it. They may or may not be research specific roles, okay? But they will value research skills. So where are we talking? One is public sector, so government roles, Department of Education, Department of Jobs and Precincts, all of those sorts of things. There are lots of opportunities inside the private sector, potentially with Big Four consultancies, but pretty much all kinds of industry around the place is looking for HDR skills. Not-for-profits are really important. Startups, which may not be anything that you've thought of before. So it may be entrepreneurial options where you're starting an option, or it may just be a startup company that is within their first 5 years of setup, and so they're called startups. What I mean by the third space is professional roles within a university context. So, for example, I have one of those. My role could actually be accepted as an academic position or a professional role. So even if there are research aligned positions at university, they may not be as advertised as academic or research roles. Don't forget about professional roles inside universities. It's called third space. They are, well, I think I've got one of the best jobs I've ever had, so I'm pretty happy with mine. And of course, working as consultants for another space. So let's get started. Who are the top 50 employers in the public sector? Now, this comes from Advancing Australia's Knowledge Economy from the CSIRO from 2019. Yes, it's hard to read, and I'm sorry about that. But this is basically all of the government departments who have been extraordinarily high recruiters of research specialists. So in defence and space, we've got the obvious players there. Inside the federal government, the Bureau of Statistics, the Taxation Office, but also ones that you may not necessarily think of. The Australian Institute of Sport employs a lot of researchers. Department of Human Services, Geoscience Australia, IP Australia. You will most likely find that your discipline area will be represented in some form or another in this list. So in state government, there's an awful lot of options. What you may hopefully be able to tell from this list is, out of the state government list, as I delete it for you, let's go back. Out of that state government list, most of them are in Victoria. So that's something else that you need to consider. There will always be roles for researchers outside academia, but the same as inside academia, not all of them will happen in sleepy Brisbane. There are a lot of opportunities here, but for those of you who are not located in Brisbane, you're used to looking afield. For those of us who are based in Brisbane, sometimes we forget there's a bigger world out there that are looking for our skills. So potentially considering moving some of your criteria or your boundaries in terms of your job search would be really helpful. There's also hospital and healthcare, as you can see, and museums and other institutions. So they're within the public sector. For the private sector, we've also got a list of the top 50. So the purpose of this workshop is to really give you as many suggestions as possible and then scaffold how to look for these kinds of roles and where to best look for them to give yourself the best opportunity. So within banking, financial services and insurance, there's a lot of basically every major bank always values higher degree by research. Qualifications in computer software and IT, inside engineering, there are some major firms. In legal and legal services, medical and pharmaceutical, you have a lot of choices there, and I keep moving the slide, sorry. In mining, oil and energy, management consulting and accounting, in telecommunications, in utilities, and then places like the ABC, Boeing, Coles, Golder, those sorts of opportunities that you may not have thought of, that they couldn't categorize any other way. So as you can see, so many opportunities, it would be a shame for you not to be aware of those. You can download Advancing Australia's Knowledge Economy, the CSI report from 2019, and then you will have your own more legible copy anytime. So essentially what it's saying, and these are given proportion by statistics in terms of who is employing them and how many they are employing. So you've got a lot of options, which is amazing. So if we know the sort of organisations who may be looking for you, what type of jobs are they holding? So if it feels like, okay, I've just given you a start, but what in the world do I look for? What are my search terms? These are some to get you started. They are by no means comprehensive, but it gives you an idea. These may range from things like a research grants advisor, a business analyst, a business development manager. You may not have thought of that kind of thing as a PhD worthy role, but in fact it totally is. Research assistant, research scientist, evaluation manager, clinical research administrator, qualitative research consultant, clinical trial coordinator. We're just trying to give you a taste of what kinds of things to look for so that you don't miss these opportunities. Esther, you are right. Defence has one of the largest budgets out of any government department. So yes, they are most certainly in a position to be able to be resourced to find you. Okay, so let's answer this fundamental question. We know that research degrees are not just valuable, but they are essential to a career inside academia. But is a research degree valuable to industry? It's not even really a question. The answer is, of course, yes. But why is it yes? Sometimes it's important to know why they would be looking for you so that you know how to sell your particular skill set. So it's important to industry because you are their ticket to innovation capability. You are their ticket to global competitiveness, to productivity and efficiency. So they need people like you who can solve incredibly complex problems, not just offer solutions, but also explain extraordinarily complex things in layman's terms so that they can not just present a solution, but make that solution understood. So these are the skills that you bring. You may think that your field of expertise is quite narrow. And this is one of the core issues, shall we say, that in my experience, HDR candidates really struggle with. They go, my research area is so very small that there are very few roles offered within that field. Can I just, if you only remember one thing that I'm going to say today, it is this: your expertise is far broader than your thesis topic. Your expertise does not equal your thesis topic. That is one example, and yes, it's a major example, right? It's major, but your thesis topic is one demonstration, piece of evidence that you can do this depth of research. It, of course, should mean that you can transfer that research depth into another field. So your skills include, yes, your discipline knowledge, but fundamentally it's your research skills, your data analysis skills, and your project management skills that they will be looking for. If you stop at your discipline knowledge, you are missing three really fundamental things that employers outside academia are really prioritizing. So you must include all of those strengths and skills, because you all have them, in those extra areas, and evidence how you've built those so that you can speak to the need of the industry partner. It's all from there. It is a sales technique of matching their gap, their recruitment gap, with your skills to make sure that that is a perfect fit. Okay, so picture with me. Recruiters think they know who they're looking for before they start looking. So as soon as they have a gap, they think they know who they want to fill that gap. So they shine a spotlight onto the people that they expect might be your best fit. So imagine yourself, you are on the right stage. You are an expert musician, if we use this particular image. You're an expert musician, you have a microphone, but the spotlight might not be on you specifically. So my encouragement to you is use the microphone and move so that you are under the spotlight. I want you to remember that image, because there will be places, there will be times when you will have to move, and it doesn't mean that you're moving outside your area of expertise or that you are moving outside a role that is ideal and of a level that is pitched at the correct space for you. But there is likely to be a lack of understanding of the value of engaging a PhD or an MPhil graduate. They haven't come across someone like you very often, perhaps ever before. So it is up to you to sell your unique value proposition, and it is huge, so it is worth selling. So they may not have identified the need that it has to be a PhD or an MPhil qualification. So they haven't included that in their job advertisements. So all that means is be clever with your keyword search. Usually the term research is more all-encompassing. If you narrow your search by using the qualification that you will finish with here at QUT, you may not find most of the awesome opportunities. So don't limit yourself by the qualification level that they're asking for. The other issue with industry is that they may not appreciate exactly what you have to offer. Within an academic environment, you don't have to explain yourself very much, right? Because people within this environment speak the same language as you. They understand that if you've published 3 articles in a top quality journal, that speaks for itself. For industry, they go, well, that's lovely, but how does that help me? So it is up to you to translate the skills that you have and the experience that you've built into their context. So a lot of it is just learning new vocabulary. We'll go through some of that later. So let's get started. How in the world do you find industry jobs? Can I just do a quick search, either in the chat or feel free to unmic yourself and just say, if you were looking for a non-academic job, where would you be looking? Can you let me know where you search? LinkedIn, Seek, professional, organizational. I like all of these. Okay. Lots of you are on LinkedIn. Have you folk been to some of my workshops before? Yes, I know you have. I recognize your names. Thank you. Directly through organisation work websites, Queensland Smart Jobs, yes. These are fabulous suggestions. Ethical jobs, yes. I'm loving the breadth that's coming up here. For those of you who, for yourself, these may not be things that you are familiar with, take some notes from the chat because these are gold. All right, I'm relieved that you haven't just said, I look at Seek and Seek is the only thing I look at. It's a great resource. One of the core drawbacks from Seek is because it's such a good resource, everyone's on it, which also then means that you are competing with everyone else that looks at Seek. It doesn't mean it's a bad resource to look at, but it also is not comprehensive. There isn't one comprehensive website, so spread yourself around. Set up alerts at a lot of these places so that the jobs then come to you rather than you having to do searches on a regular basis. Can I suggest for those of you who are early in their candidature, so you're not actually actively looking for roles right at the moment, but you're getting set so that you can when the time is right. For people like you, what I would suggest is leave the search locations off completely, because for now, what you want to know is what are these jobs called and who is hiring for them and where might they be hiring for, so that when it comes time to graduate, then you've got a better idea that, well, I can see that more than 50% of my genuine opportunities are going to be in the southern states. Am I willing to move or not? Some of you can, some of you haven't thought about it. Others of you totally cannot for other personal commitments, family commitments, and that's perfectly fine. But at the moment, understand where your opportunities might be so that if you can consider being more flexible in things like geography, let them know. So then you've got time to plan. Okay. So how does recruitment vary? Well, in academia, there's a selection. It's kind of onerous to apply for academic roles, let's be honest, or even third space professional roles inside universities. It's a little bit onerous. They ask for a selection criteria. They will do a publication search. So they will look at your ORCID ID. They will look at your research profile and your teaching experience to see if you're a good candidate. And you will probably have to do an interview panel. Something that's important for you to know is that industry recruitment looks pretty different, actually. It's a lot faster to apply for roles outside of academia because often, those of you who look on LinkedIn, often you can just do a quick apply on LinkedIn, which is send my profile, and that's all you've got to do. Gosh, it's easy. It's really nice, actually, so that it doesn't always take you a huge amount of effort. For government roles, they will ask you to write a statement of claims. That's usually a 1 or 2 page document that's a little bit of a hybrid between a cover letter and a set of selection criteria, but they give you usually 2 pages to say, this is why, this is my statement of claims, this is why I measure up to the role that you've got. Industry uses keyword searches. They usually use applicant tracking software for the bigger organizations. The little startups or the entrepreneurial small businesses, probably not. But the bigger ones will use applicant tracking software. So you need to understand what you have to do and what you should never do in terms of your resume presentation, for example. First of all, they need a professional resume, not an academic CV. And for those of you who are familiar with some of the drums that I beat, that is one of them. There's lots of resources on our HDR Blackboard site that will show you what the differences are between those. But it's things like not adding tables into your resume because the applicant tracking software just turns it into wingdings. It can't read them. So it's good formatting, consistent formatting, and using the keywords that they've used in the job applications so that you are one of the best highlighted candidates. Often they will do a video interview as well. And for those of you who are automatically going, I hate the idea of a video interview, well, join the club. They're not fun. They are a bit of an acquired taste, but it is really, really possible to practice your video interview presence and to get used to it. I've been teaching interview techniques for nearly 17 years now. The first time, about 4 years ago, that I was asked to do a video interview that was timed, which means that I had 90 seconds to state my answers. Again, those of you who know me, there's not a lot I can get said in 90 seconds. I like to add lots of terms. Conciseness is not one of my strengths. So the first time I did a video interview, I bombed. So even people with deep expertise in the way to answer questions, even people like me, we were not prepared for the degree of brevity that takes. So it is something that you need to practice. QUT has a platform that's called Big Interview. So if you go on the QUT site and Google QUT Big Interview platform, it will bring that up for you. You can practice. So you can set up interview questions, you can set up interview answers, you can practice them, you can send them to each other for some feedback. You can even send them to me if you like, for me to give you a critique on them. The site will give you some critique of how your delivery goes, but be careful that the feedback that they give you is not on the content, it's just on your delivery, which is really important. It's the eye contact, it's the ums and the ahs and the hesitations, which is all great feedback to have. But if you want someone who is able to critique you on how well did you actually answer the question as well, send it on to me. So we've got lots of tools to help you. I guess fundamentally what I'm wanting you to get from today is that the processes are different, the documents are different, the focus is different, and the mechanisms that they use to recruit you with are also really, really different. So here's a couple of other differences. The type of sites that you may be used to. Academic roles are found on, well, you build your profile on ORCID. If you haven't heard of Campus Radar, it's one that I would love for you to put on your radar. At the moment, it's brand new. And what I love about this platform is it's for academic roles. So I'm not going to spend much time on it today. But the really cool part about this is that you can upload your resume. You can upload a blog about your research, which it's a Brisbane-based platform, which is why I think it's important for us to jump on board. QUT is a preferred partner, one of 10 institutions at the moment. But for students, it is always free to register, to sign up. And as a researcher, you are welcome to add a blog about your current research or what role you are looking for on that site. We have the director of Campus Radar coming out to QUT to deliver a workshop on that. I think it's the 22nd or the 23rd of November. So in the events section for QUT events and appointments, have a look for the Campus Radar workshop and I will see you there. So that's for academic roles. Here's how they're different. So a lot of you mentioned LinkedIn, and that just warms my heart that you did, because there are a lot of roles that are available on LinkedIn. It's a really powerful platform for, let's be honest, it's not particularly useful for academic appointments and academic career roles. So that's potentially why many of your supervisors may not even be on LinkedIn. But for anyone who is open to or aiming for a non-academic role, for an industry role, it really is one of those platforms that's essential to be a part of. Now, I don't know whether any of you know that you can open your profile on LinkedIn to be open to recruiters without having that I'm unemployed green badge that says I'm open to work. For those of you who haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, I'm the only Karen Carvu on there, so it's really easy to find me. Find me, connect with me, and then I can help you from there to do a review of your LinkedIn profile if you would like. If anybody is interested to know how to make yourself available to recruiters, ask me at the end and I'll go through that with you if we've got time at the end of this workshop. Randstad, I've picked as just one of the many big recruiting firms that are based in Australia. The reason that I've chosen Randstad to highlight here is because they tend to be the recruiter of choice for government roles. So they know better than anyone else how to find roles in the public service within the government. They also have some pretty terrific recruitment advice, how to sell your skills, how to put resumes together on their website. So go to their website, register for their alerts, and read what they say about what makes a powerful resume or a powerful application, because they know what they're talking about. And I was really pleased that one of you mentioned ethical jobs is a place that you look for. This is fabulous. It tends to attract the non-STEM research students, but that doesn't mean that a STEM student can't look there and find a really awesome opportunity. But they tend to be the not-for-profits and the roles that specify or organize with organizations that specify sustainability and things that, again, ethical jobs are there because they work for a better world. And if that is one of your values in terms of what you're looking for in a future employer, it's a terrific place to start because you've already got some indication that there will be a lot of shared values between yourself and that new employer. So let's get back to how do I actually find where these roles are sitting? So first of all, first step is to learn the terminology. So what do these research roles look like, sound like, feel like outside? It's important that you use the right terminology. So for example, something really, really simple is inside academia, we talk about, and in this current role, I talk about students because let's be honest, that's our core demographic that we're trying to reach. So within that said, when I was an undergraduate careers educator, I would use the term student constantly. Now that I'm working with HDRs and ECRs, I try not to use the term student very much because to me, and potentially to you as well, that indicates a more junior undergraduate student learner. You are fully fledged adult candidates. So I try to use HDR candidate, or I will use early researcher, where are the research roles, to try to match my terminology to something that resonates with you. So it's the same with industry roles. You need to know the terminology that they use. Do they use clients? Do they use customers? Do they use stakeholders? Those sorts of terminologies, just the really simple ones, will mean that when you're writing your examples, you transfer your terminology to something that makes sense to them. And then they'll go, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm not familiar with your context, but you clearly know my context. Thank you for making it well understood. Secondly, it's about knowing where the useful sites are. We've already talked about a few of them. There's a lot in the chat already. Know those useful sites. And as I say, set the alerts early. That means that you don't have to constantly troll through 20 different sites to find the roles that you are looking for. You set your parameters and wait for them to come to you, which means that when you have a role of interest, then you know what to do with it. Number 3 is be willing to be found. So trying not to paint with too broad a brush here, but there are a lot of people in research who love to do research because they like to just be left alone to do their own thing. This doesn't mean that all researchers are introverts, I know that, but often as researchers, we're a little shy, gun shy about selling ourselves in public. Hello, imposter syndrome. I haven't met any HDR candidate yet who has been able to say, I love selling myself and spruiking my platform. You know, this is something I'm really comfortable with. Most of you are a bit uncomfortable with it. So my advice is acknowledge that discomfort, sit with it for a bit, and then find which ways around it you are able to be comfortable. So it may not mean promote yourself on every possible platform. There are a lot. Not everyone is happy with LinkedIn. From a privacy perspective, not everybody is happy with the privacy settings on pretty much everywhere online. But if you are not found online, if you do not have a digital presence, you cannot be searched for. And if you cannot be searched, it's pretty difficult for you to be found any other way than you do all the work to find those roles and then apply for it. As you may have heard before, over 70% of roles are never advertised. So that's not just for research roles, that is across the board. About 70% of roles are never advertised. That means that 70% of those people who are hired were hired because they were found before the role had to be advertised. So where are you going to be found? If you are uncomfortable with digital platforms, then what is your alternative? And how do you leverage that alternative to give you the same kind of industry capital? So speaking of industry capital, here's step number 4, build some if you don't already have some. Several of you had previous careers in different industries before you came to QUT as an HDR student. Use the industry capital that you've already built, either within that industry, or use the same approaches to broaden those industry opportunities. Build your industry career capital. So social capital, as you know, is the ability to establish beneficial social networks that have mutual benefit for your success, whether that's your mental health and well-being, whether that's to foster other options that you are trying to do. But career capital is kind of the same thing. It's the tools, it's the network, and it's the language that you use so that you can demonstrate that you are part of this community. So have a think about what you would consider to be your industry career capital at the moment. If all of your career capital has been to date invested within universities, so you've fostered your academic career capital, but you're now considering or needing to consider moving outside of that, you need to then build an extra set of career capital. You've got your academic career capital, but what is your industry career capital? Who do you know? Who are you following? Who are you networked with? What events do you know about? What's your general knowledge of that field or of that industry? If you can't really answer any of that at the moment, just go, well, maybe I don't really have any. This is your next project, isn't it? How to build your industry career capital. So it's building those connections, working with your vocabulary and your terminology so that you understand the lingo in these new opportunities that you might be able to be looking for. If you don't speak their language, it's really difficult to be shortlisted for roles. Which again segues beautifully into point number 5, which is learn how to translate your skills by using the language of your destination, not your point of origin. Because at the moment, university, academia is your point of origin. How do you translate that into industry-ready language? One of the best ways to practice how to do this is the 3-minute thesis competition. Those of you who saw our finalists for this year and those beautiful videos that they produced, it is fabulous experience to learn how to distill what is probably a really extraordinarily complicated thesis topic that's taking you 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is, full-time or part-time, to fully unpack, to be able to distill that down into 3 minutes is an extraordinary skill. I personally haven't mastered it yet, but it is something I'm working on. What that does is teach you how to communicate for lay audiences without making them feel like you've dumbed it down for them, but that you can sell the advantages of your research, communicate your findings in a way that's really readily understandable. If you haven't ever done it, I recommend it thoroughly. And I also suggest that a platform such as Campus Radar that lets you upload your blog, or LinkedIn is the other one. So potentially do one blog or one video of 3 minutes about your research, 800 words, 3 minutes. Write that, video that, and upload it to platforms like that. So even if you didn't make the finals of the 3MT competition, or if you're not resourced to be able to spend the time to do that, drafting it and promoting it on platforms like that. 1, it gets your research known, which is important in itself. 2, it demonstrates that you have the skill of communicating really complex technical information in a briefly understandable way. So evidence like that is something that would add enormous industry career capital to your resume. For example, if you had your LinkedIn profile and your LinkedIn profile had a video, a 3-minute video of you discussing your thesis topic in 3 minutes to a lay audience, would speak volumes in a much more powerful way than say, I have the ability to communicate complicated things in layman's terms. It's much easier to show that rather than talk about it. So show them and use those platforms as often as you can. Now, let's talk about, oh, where did that go? Let's go back, slides. So some sites that may open some doors for you. You may have heard of some of these. You may not have heard of many of them or any of them. This is not supposed to be a comprehensive list. And so you can screenshot this if you would like, but I will send you the slides so you'll have this ready to go. But it's not supposed to be comprehensive. What this slide is meant to do is just demonstrate the breadth and how many pathways there are to jobs outside academia. So you need to research which sites open the right sort of doors for you. So one of these may be completely irrelevant to you to start with, or particularly interesting. My suggestion, until you really know for sure, is that you can look at as many of these as possible, sign up for alerts within these web pages, but make them specific if you can, so that you're not getting bombarded with 50 jobs a day at particular places, particularly with the recruitment companies. You don't want to be bombarded with every opportunity they've got, because most of them will be irrelevant to you. So be specific in your search terms. If you don't know whether there are more appropriate sites than these or which is the right one for you, pretty simple suggestion is Google your discipline, then add the word recruiter or recruitment after that and see what comes up. So again, things like Randstad is for government roles in particular. Scout Talent is really helpful for education roles. And Stat Recruitment is a medical recruitment agency. So you will probably find that there is a specialist recruitment company or multiple companies that specialize in your particular discipline, if not your field. Find out which ones they are and put them on repeat so that you get to know the kinds of roles. My suggestion is to do that before you're looking, because the example that I often use is when you're teaching a 4-year-old to ride a bike, you don't start them on a mountain bike, on a full-size mountain bike. You start them on trainer wheels. So it is quite possible that you will not be an expert at submitting an extraordinarily high quality, able to be shortlisted first go application the first time you do it. My suggestion is, before you know you need to look for roles, practice on a couple. So send an application to a role that you would be interested in, but you're not actually looking for right now, so that you can learn from that experience and use it as training wheel practice. So just because you are a PhD or an MPhil, soon to be graduate, doesn't mean that you are the master of recruitment practice in particular fields. So get used to it, practice it. Obviously, I'm not suggesting spend every living moment doing this or spend every weekend doing it, but just a few, so that you can go, oh, I get the hang of this now. This is first step. This is second step. This is, oh, I got to third step this time. Maybe it's 3 out of 5 steps. Maybe you get lucky and before you're ready for a role, they were willing to shortlist you or consider you. What an amazing opportunity that could lead to as you negotiate, well, I'm not ready yet. I'm not finished yet. Is there a way that we could work together, but maybe in a different way than you were anticipating through this job? It's not wasting their time any more than it's wasting yours, because the idea is that you master the art so that when you are ready for shortlisting and you need a job, then it's not your first attempt. It's not the first time that you're on a bike. So it's your 4th attempt, 5th attempt, so that you are more likely to go all the way through to shortlisting for interview, so that you give yourself the best chance. All right, take note of some of those options and at least know that there are so many around. Ideally, this is why you set alerts and then get them to come to you. Even if we just use this page's list, you'd be doing an awful lot of Googling for what are the roles available at the moment. You just want to do it once, set up alerts, so then they come to your inbox and you don't have to keep remembering where they all are. Okay, so first step, clarify what your interests, your strengths, your skills, your values. Remind yourself about who you are and what you would look for and what might make a great fit to you. Understand how your strengths and skills align with industry needs right now. One of the best ways to do this, if you haven't done it before, or if you haven't done it in a while, go onto the HiQ site and search for the HDR Skills Assessment Tool. It's a little quiz. It'll take you about 10 minutes and it will help you Say, yes, this is where I'm at with these sorts of skills. This is the work that I still need to do. And the tool will help direct you to other resources where you need to build them. It's important to know what you want and what you're already good at so that you know where to start looking. So clarify first. Next step is to share. What are we sharing? Well, we're sharing your career goals with your supervisors. You're sharing your career goals with your colleagues, whether at home or abroad, or wherever your future career may take you. You are sharing what you've already done in bite-sized pieces by uploading an 800-word blog, by uploading 3-minute videos. Anything, if you have delivered a talk, upload it. If you have built a PowerPoint presentation that talks through, this actually clarifies an awful lot of my skills and demonstrates it. Again, share that. So share your goals, share your achievements to date, and share evidence on whichever platform you are comfortable with. And that might be LinkedIn, it might be a different platform, but whichever platform you're willing to invest in, make sure that you invest the time to get there. Now, thirdly, engage. What does engage actually mean? Well, it means when you're looking for an industry role, engage with industry. It sounds pretty self-evident, doesn't it? I'm looking for an industry role. I need to engage with industry. But it's not that self-explanatory, is it? It's like how, when, where, why? Where do I start? It's engaging with industry to gain experience and connections and to conduct informational interviews. Again, those of you who've done a few of my workshops will know this is one of my key tips. Informational interviews will get you everywhere, pretty much. So engage with them, conduct informational interviews with industry contacts. An informational interview is just tell me your story in 15 to 20 minutes, how you came to be in this role and what you learned along the way. So it's all about them, not about you, but you gain enormous insight as you have these conversations. Would you look at that? The final step is to search. Often we start with search, don't we? Oh, I'm looking for an industry job. Let's get on Seek or whatever. And then we'll start looking first. Actually, we look last. It's important to look, but we do that last. So current roles, here's another few sites that you may not have known about. Research the current job advertisements through Seek. Yes, you are allowed to look on Seek, but don't limit it to Seek. Research Career is another one. Go and Global is another one that's really helpful for international candidates who are all for domestic candidates who are looking to go somewhere else to build their roles. All right, how are we tracking? I feel like it's been a speed webinar so far. Am I going too fast? Am I giving you enough time to absorb this information? Are there any questions so far? Excellent, thank you. Right, we're going all right. So let's keep going. Let me give you some further information. Oh, yeah, I am still screen sharing, that's good. The light just went off, so I just wanted to make sure it was still there. When we talk about building industry capital, let's look at what that actually means in a more concrete way. So one of the ways to build industry capital, and my colleagues in the industry team, Ingrid, will be very excited to hear me say that I encourage you to explore internships. Now, they can be big, they can be small, they can be official through our team, or they can be self-sourced. These will be a key point of difference. One of the things that you may come up against a bit of a struggle is in the way that you're translating your skills to a different context. If you feel that you've had no experience inside that context, you may not apply. So, am I right there? It's like, oh yeah, but I've never worked in that kind of an organization, so what would I know? First of all, I want to overcome a bit of imposter syndrome. Just because you haven't worked in that context does not mean that you can't translate those skills. But one of the things that industry roles always look for that's pretty different in focus to academic roles. Academic roles are focused on outputs, right? They're focused on research articles, publications, conferences. These are outputs that are obviously relevant and important within that context. It's an output as evidence of your research chops, right? Industry, and please don't hear this the wrong way, I'm not saying that they don't care about them, but industry doesn't care about outputs, because from an industry perspective, outputs are personal to you. Inside academia, it's not that simple, right? Outputs, research outputs are of benefit to the whole research community, to your institution, to your supervisor or your project team, as well as yourself. But from an industry perspective, they see that as, well, that's great for you, but from our perspective, so what? What are you going to do for us? Industry cares about outcomes. You see the difference? An output rather than an outcome. So an outcome is different to an output. So the outcome of your research inside academia could be, I wrote a paper. Industry will say, good for you, but what did you change? What moved because of what you found? What difference did you make to whichever field or environment you were looking at? So what changed? What did you move? What did you achieve that is a quantifiable outcome? Now, that's completely different language to what is used inside academia and throughout your research career. So have a think about how you would translate what you are currently working on, what you have previously worked on. How would you quantify what you've achieved into an outcome? So an easy way to do that is to go, how do I know I'm any good at it? Well, this is how I'd quantify it. It might be, as a careers educator, how do I know I'm good at running careers workshops? Well, academically, I would say because I've delivered them. Ta-da, that means I'm good at it. Well, no, because we've all been to workshops. Hopefully this is not one of them. We've all been to workshops where you go, didn't really get much out of that. Didn't really learn much. So I count my outcomes, not just from the number of sessions that I run, not even from the number of people that register for them, although that's one measurement that is useful. It's also by the feedback that I get from the follow-up one-to-ones that I may get, from the responses, from the recommendations that I receive on LinkedIn. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. It's not just from that. It's how do I know I've made an impact? Well, yes, I'm relying on you to tell me, but where I've made an impact, that's how I measure myself. So think of the way you work, what you're researching. How do you know that you're good at it? What impact have you made? Quantify them, because industry requires you to do that, because they're interested in your outcomes. We want to hire someone who's effective at this. Demonstrate your effectiveness by what you've changed, what you've impacted, what you've grown. And that's going to look pretty different in a lot of different contexts. Okay, so big spiel over one line. So the other option is, particularly for those of you who are internationals, those of you who haven't grown up in Australia with a part-time job in Australia, working down at Coles, working down at Target, whatever it may be, to build your employee capital within the Australian job market. For those of you who are internationals, it is really important. You must have Australian employers who you can use as referees to say, this is what Karen's like in the workplace. Ideally from a supervisor, whether the role is relevant to what you're trying to do as an international. If you're looking for roles in Australia, it doesn't matter whether it's relevant. I am not suggesting that you get a job down at 7-Eleven or Woolworths or whatever it is and sit in that and dedicate 30 hours a week to that role until you graduate. You don't have time for that, and it wouldn't be to your advantage. What I am suggesting, though, is that you find the shortest, sharpest, most effective way to build a number of industry, so workplace referees who can speak to what you are like in the workplace. And that may be just as simple as your work ethic, your punctuality, your ability to prioritize that industry's priorities while you're at work. The shortest, sharpest way to build that career capital. You must have Australian referees. Yes, you can use your supervisor or an academic tutor or something like that, that you have established relationships with, but they cannot tell what you are like Monday to Friday or whatever it is. They're not able to say they're always on time. They're really punctual. They come, whether it's rain, hail or shine. They're fabulous to have around the workplace. They're really encouraging to other people. Their communication skills are fabulous. As an international person who potentially may have English as a second language, one of the unfortunate consequences of that for Australian employers is they need to feel comfortable that you understand what working in an Australian workplace looks like, because in your home country, the cultural norms will be completely different, right? So you need to demonstrate that you know how things work in Australia, and they need to know that you can understand instructions or client engagement, and that you can communicate effectively in return. So again, the shortest, sharpest way for you to do that is to find a job, any job right now, to get you back on a level playing field with local Australians. Okay, so for all of you, it's important to build role experience where you can. Not every Australian domestic student has built that, although most of them have. So it's usually more important for internationals. But if you were one of those lucky few that went through their undergrad without needing a part-time job, that you found other ways, there is volunteering. There is things like being part of the HDR committees, those kinds of things that demonstrate your ability to give back. So you could find research roles that way. Tutoring roles are quite simple, but literally any role can help you convert industry terminology and fluency with corporate language, which is important. So again, some of you said at the beginning that the place you look for roles is through your professional organisation, which is terrific. Have a think about how many professional organisations you could potentially join as a student, which will be hopefully rock bottom price for maximum effectiveness. Obviously, they're going to be relevant to your discipline alone. And because it's me and because I'm a mad convert, well, a mad advocate for the platform, engage on LinkedIn. Follow people, follow companies, follow thought leaders, follow alumni. Use LinkedIn as your informational interview database and see what you can do there. Like contributions that are already there. Sometimes that's all you've got to do. Celebrate it, like things, then share things. So you're not even having to write your own content at this point, and then make your own contributions. Okay. Ruth's suggestion, yes, looking for volunteer roles, especially if you're new to Australia, again, is really, really powerful. Again, I'm not suggesting that you dedicate 30 hours a week to this. If you've got family commitments, if you've got study commitments, of course you do, you've got research commitments, there is a limit to how much time you can dedicate to this. But if you haven't started anywhere and you're not quite ready to find a part-time job, then volunteer roles are really, really powerful. And again, you don't have to volunteer often. You might just be, hey, there's a big event coming up, and I was on the committee, the volunteer committee that organised it. The HDR symposiums that each school presents are usually run by volunteers. If you were to volunteer as part of the committee to run an HDR symposium, goodness me, you're going to make a lot of friends. Now, yes, that is within academia, but you are learning how to build employee referees, okay? All right, now I've used the term informational interviewing a lot. What in the world am I talking about? Well, I mostly use Zoom for these. Here's the definition. So you can do them online, face-to-face. My suggestion is to start with online because it only then takes literally the length of your conversation, and that's the only investment both you and your interviewee has to extend. So it's asking about them. It's focusing on them, and set your limit at about 15 to 20 minutes conversation. Even busy people, busy executives can find 15 to 20 minutes if you sell the value. And one of the values is that it's important for them to give back. So the benefit for you is that through this, you can find out firsthand what it's genuinely like working in that industry, that sector, that organisation, or within that particular role. You don't really know until you work there. But if you talk to 2 or 3 people, if you think, oh, I'd love to work for Boeing. I've always wanted to work for Boeing. Maybe that's based out of a fantasy or an idea that you think is accurate, but how do you know that's really accurate? If you really want to work for Boeing, who do you know who works at Boeing? Who have you spoken to that works at Boeing? If your answer is no one, how do you know you want to work at Boeing. Ideally, 3 conversations with somebody who works in that organization, or 3 conversations with people who work at different organizations, but in a similar role, will give you a better idea of what it's honestly like. It also helps you figure out, I did not know that job even existed. Or if I'd read about the role, I don't even know what that means. What is it that you do all day? You can find out, what does that role actually consist of? What is it that you do all day? So you're learning about career paths or specific roles that you might not properly understand. And it helps other people get to know you. So building your industry capital, being available, being willing to be found, and building your network, because everyone that you do an informational interview with, it is quite likely that none of them will ever have a job that they will suggest that you should apply for. That's not why you're speaking to them. But if a role comes up in that company, you've got an inside view of how that role came about, what that role might involve, and you do have an insider who can give you some tips. Well, hey, this is how I got into this organization. Maybe you could try that too. While we're on the topic, here's a little one-pager of what does informational interviewing actually look like. So my suggestion is to start with alumni. So start with somebody who is maybe 5 years ahead of you, but who is now doing something that you think would be kind of cool and might suit your skill set. So where do we find these people? Well, on LinkedIn, there are lots of alumni communities. There are lots of alumni groups, but on LinkedIn, you can always do an alumni search. You can look at QUT, you can look at PhD. You can combine those 2 things and then find everyone who's done a PhD at QUT and make your list. What you then do is go, and who is doing something that I'm curious about right now? Then you contact them with your purpose, send 2 lines, introduce yourself, why you're interested in them. This is why I suggest that you start with QUT alumni, because you've already got a good excuse, a good reason to be connecting with them. Hi, I'm also completing my research degree at QUT as you did. That's the only justification you need. I'm really curious about your career path, and I'd love to spend 15 to 20 minutes having a conversation with you about it. Would you have any time in the next 2 weeks to set this up? It takes 2 lines. Then you spend your time listening, not speaking. It's not about you, it's about them. If they ask you a reciprocal question, of course you'd respond with your information, but it's not about you. What advice would you give me? No, it's about, tell me how you got started. Why did you start there? What do you know now that you wished you'd known when you were at my stage? Those kinds of things. And then be gracious, be grateful. And then if you develop a terrific relationship with them, then suggest you do it again. And if you've done it 3 times with the same person and you are interested to do so, ask if they would be open to considering becoming your professional mentor. But don't do that on your first conversation. All right. It's all very well to say, ask some interesting questions. What are interesting questions? What might they look like? Here's a bit of a guide for you. There are 4 different categories that I'm suggesting you can talk them through, get them to talk you through. You can ask about their career path, their current role, their organization, or the skills that they use most often. What does that look like? As you can see, can you walk me through your career path to date? Really simple questions, brief, but super to the point and focused on them. Why and how did you choose this career path? What did nobody tell you about this career that you're currently doing that would have been useful to have known up front? Or what other careers did you consider? Because potentially the information that they give you is enough for you to go, oh, I get it. Yeah, that's great for you. The more I hear about this, the less I'm interested in this. So potentially, what else did you consider that gives you an understanding of what your other choices might be? So questions you could ask about the current role. What excites you most? What do you like least? I think it's really good to know the good, the bad, and the ugly about these sorts of things. What have you learned in this role? And then potentially describe a typical day. If you are as keen or more keen on the organisation than their particular role inside it, then ask a little bit about how that organisation manages themselves. Where are your growth opportunities? What's the leadership or team leadership style? How does the culture there support you? What were you not expecting about working there that you found either good or bad? And then in terms of skills, what skills do you use most frequently? What research specific skills do you access in your job? I love this question, especially if it's not a designated research specific role, but a role that would be great as a researcher. So what skills do you use in that job? What new skills have you acquired? As a top-up question and a conclusion question, I suggest that you look at this advice column. I've shaded it grey because I want you to ask these kinds of questions first, but then at the end, who else could I connect with from your workplace or your network? Would you have capacity for a further conversation? Or it might be, what haven't I asked yet that you're dying to tell me? This is when you focus on you, but for the rest of the conversation, you're focused on. All right. We have another half an hour, which is exactly what I wanted to do. I have some research roles that I found for you this morning. If you wanted to have a look at those and unpack them together as a group, I'd be really keen to do that. Otherwise, do you have any specific questions that you might want to go through? Would you like to do some experimenting with these potential roles that I found, or would you like to do something else? To experiment? All right, hang on for a second and I will stop sharing, load my other screens, and I'll find these roles. I have too many screens open. Right, I found a couple. So I have deliberately used, I will reshare my screen. I have deliberately used, I've deliberately used Seek, even though I've said Seek is usually not the best way to find roles. I've deliberately used Seek so that you can see that it is possible to find Seek roles. First of all, I'm now screen sharing. I just want to double check that I am sharing the Design Research Manager. Can you all see that? Making sure that I'm sharing the right screen. Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Right. I found this role on Seek. It is currently available. And the search term that I used was research development. So research development is not a job in itself. And I find that can be quite useful when you're looking for industry roles. Using the term research, even the term research, might narrow it down a little bit. But for example, I found this one with Macquarie Group Limited. Now, it is based in Sydney, something that I found today when I did my Seek search on that search term, that the majority of roles were available in Sydney and Melbourne. Often, well, sometimes they are also offered hybrid. But again, what I would suggest is that you open yourself as broadly as you can while you're figuring out how this all works. So take the location away and find what jobs there are available in Sydney or in Melbourne. And then it's possible for you to, if you were genuinely looking, you could potentially negotiate a hybrid arrangement or a remote arrangement, or you might consider relocating. But while you're figuring out what the search terms are and what these roles mean, give yourself as much opportunity to find roles as possible. Now, to give you an idea, this one says, are you an experienced design research manager looking for your next challenge? It's to join a business banking experience. Now, your prior experience in identifying opportunities to gather data, analyze, and deliver insights. If only I knew a group of people who were good at that. This is you down to a T, right? But is that a role, a job title you would have considered searching for? I'm guessing no. So what you would do, so you need transformational change. So thereafter, an analytical mindset, passion for delivering improvements, and uplift through various stages of our client journeys. Now, you may have commonalities in some of the research programs or projects that you've been involved in. So here's a list of things that you would be able to do. Because I'm trying to find examples that are as, I guess, generic as possible to cater to as many different disciplines and fields as possible, I totally understand that some of you will look at this and go, oh, that's not me. But what we're looking for, so they're looking for a bachelor's degree, so that's their minimum. Does that mean that you are overqualified for this job? No, it means that you are far more qualified, because remember, this is their minimum. We want a bachelor's degree. So someone with more than a bachelor's degree will be more than adequately informed and resourced. Bachelor's degree students have never done research. Well, rarely done research. This is your bread and butter. So they're looking for specialists in anthropology, human-computer interaction, human factors, psychology, sociology, business, or a related field or equivalent practical experience. So what I love about this role is often people say STEM roles or STEM discipline roles are easier to find, and I'm not STEM, so where in the world do I find them? Well, actually, this is a good example of potentially why these are harder to find, because you don't know what the terminology is. So if this is you, now experience with applied quantitative and qualitative research design. I can't think of a group of people more expert in this kind of thing. So again, you see what I mean? they have asked for a bachelor's degree, but their depth of experience that they've, or research analysis that they're asking for is asking for more than just a bachelor's graduate. They're either looking for somebody who has deep corporate experience, deep research experience, or a combination of both. An appreciation of ethnographic design, research and co-design. Can anyone raise a hand and go, when's the last time you found a job that's asked for a specialization in ethnography? Hello, I'm not sure I've ever seen one before. This is really exciting. And you know what's cool about this is a banking role, which had you studied anthropology and ethnography, you probably are not thinking, where I would be guaranteed to find a great job? Banks. You probably wouldn't have made that connection. And yet this is showing that this is what they're looking for. So this is just one example. And again, I agree with you, Esther. How do they even know those words? I was really excited. And this Seek search took me 5 minutes, about a half an hour before this workshop started. So this is not even difficult to find. What is difficult, I admit, is if you narrow down your specialization, if you start to use your thesis terms, or if you narrow your search to Brisbane. You might find that you never come across these. This doesn't mean that you can't find work in Brisbane, but if you are only looking in Brisbane, you will never see how big and awesome the world is beyond that. And again, it is possible that you may be able to do this as a hybrid or remote opportunity, but they wouldn't be advertising that until they were negotiating it for the most awesome candidate, which I'm hoping you are. Here's another one. Assistant directors in policy, program, project and data with the Department of Education with the Australian government. So this is the government roles. When you have a look, the pay's not bad. 110 to 130, yes, thanks, that'll do. What are they looking for? They are looking for a small team of professionals. What's fabulous about public service is they often advertise for more than one role. Professionals responsible for identifying policy solutions, running large programs, undertaking research, analysis, and modelings. Our candidates will build lasting collaborative networks and deliver complex outcomes in a supportive, fast-paced environment. Again, target market for almost all of you. Here's another one. With the QIMR, that's so hard to say, Research Institute, there are a number of roles that are available. Some of them will be quite specific, but for example, business development analyst. Have you ever heard of a business development analyst? I hadn't specifically. Again, they're pretty neatly paid. And what's awesome is, yay, they are in Brisbane. Now, what are they looking for? Postgraduate quals in science or life science, or significant experience in medical research. Experience with the commercialization of intellectual property, valuation of IP, and a generation of commercial intelligence. What they're looking for is people with expertise in writing reports. If only I knew a group of people who were good at that. Experience working autonomously and with a small team. Now, the reason that I'm sharing these opportunities is not to say, hey, I found this perfect job, go apply for that. They're not going to be the places that will suit everybody. These particular roles are not necessarily roles that you slip straight into. But for some of them, why not? You are a highly qualified, highly competent, experienced researcher, and it's just about whether you're finding the places that are looking for your context of expertise. So, no, you can't just walk into an executive level role, but if what I wanted to do was to inspire you and go, why can't I do this role? So in the same way that you would build up to salaries as lecturer or senior lecturer, what I am demonstrating to you is you can match or even eclipse those salaries through industry roles using your expertise without needing to invest any more in retraining. Yes, you need to build an industry experience base, but some of that may already exist. So they're the roles that I wanted to showcase to you. Is anyone interested in learning how to make yourself open to recruiters behind the scenes in LinkedIn? Or do you have another set of questions that you would like to unpack? While you're thinking about that and answering this, I'm going to go back to my other shared screen with the workshop. That's where we were. And my next screen is, it's the QR code, take a picture. I love your feedback, but I would like to know what else you want to know. We're here till 2:30. So I'd like to make this as relevant as possible. So take the photo, make sure that you know where to write your feedback, and let's do another dive into LinkedIn then. Gosh, I have so many open. All right, I'm going to share with you my LinkedIn profile, which is not the be all and end all of LinkedIn profiles, okay? It's just the one I'm working with. So there are lots that I can learn, but this is the part that I want to show you. Those of you who've seen the green banner, this is open to work. My suggestion is that unless you are genuinely unemployed and you need a full-time job right now, you don't need to use the banner. This is my profile. This is what it looks like to me. It would look slightly different to you, but this is what it looks like to me. You can't tell on my profile that I'm open to work, but I am constantly open. So in this section, because, yeah, I don't like the green banner either, but for people who are genuinely in need of emergency full-time roles, it's really important. But what you will learn about my profile is I actually have 5 jobs at the moment. QUT is my most time-consuming and most fun role, but I do 5 different roles. So it's very rare that I will ever be unemployed, because that would have to be a catastrophe that they all went AWOL at the same time. But I'm always open to new options. I have what's called a portfolio career. It's really important to think about. On your section, you will probably find it under the more section to say that you are open to something. But what I've done is to say, yes, I'm open to work, but you don't see that banner because this is not for the general public. This is only for recruiters that use the LinkedIn algorithms to find candidates. You have, so if I was to edit this, I get the opportunity to write 5 different search terms as to what I would like to be found for. So that will be bespoke for you. My suggestion would be that you would always start with researcher or research analyst or something along those lines. You might then put your discipline and you might say financial analysis, if that is your field of expertise, or medical research, if that is your field of expertise. So whatever is your option, you can make these up. That's your terminology. So when you've done your Seek search to say, what do they call these roles? Where are they? Now you've got an idea of what you'd like to be searched for. You can add up to 5. And if one isn't really working or generating many leads for you, then you can change it. I've said I'm open to all kind of workplaces, on-site, hybrid, or remote. That's again up to you. I've also said that it's in Queensland. I always say that I'm actively applying just because I'd like to be found. So it doesn't mean that I have to take up any opportunity or I have to necessarily respond to any recruiter outreach unless I really want to. But these are your 2 choices. Flexible, I'm casually browsing, or immediately I'm actively applying. Personally, I always feel that people take you seriously if you're actively looking. So try that. And if it generates too much traffic, change it. But try that one first. Then it asks whether you're full-time, contract, part-time, whatever. Again, you tailor that to what you want. Now, this is where I want to show you. If you make yourself available, open to work to all LinkedIn members, here's that green banner, which I don't particularly love. All LinkedIn members is the banner, but recruiters only is only people using LinkedIn recruiter algorithm, which means that I can save this and no one else, my employers all know that I do this because I work as career coach everywhere and they're perfectly happy with it because this is how I show you how it's done. Does this make a difference? Yes, it does. If you actually look at my career, LinkedIn helped me get this job. In fact, 2 or 3 of them should say that. The Hello Monday coach should also say that. LinkedIn helped me get this job. I know this works because it happens to me. I was not looking for another job, but recruiters reached out to me and said, actually, the search term that you are looking for, that we were looking for, you came up as a really great candidate. Are you interested? And I went, well, maybe. Tell me more. We did an informational interview, essentially. They rang and said, so let me spruik our job to you. Are you keen? And I said, oh my goodness, that sounds amazing. Yes, I am. I'm only available 1 day a week to work for you. Is that okay? So that's how it's done. It's really, really simple, but it's super important. So if you're not sure how to get to this window, then in the help section, just Google how to be open to work on LinkedIn. Again, if you're not sure how to do your informational interviews, what I do is in the search field, I look for, now what am I actually looking for? If I'm looking for research analyst roles, hopefully you can still see this. The text gets a little bit small, doesn't it? First of all, it tells me who is closest in my connections, who is working as a research analyst. For me, I'm actually not first connection connected with anyone as a research analyst, but that's okay. I've got a few seconds that I can try, but you can search under people. That'll give you a different list of people. This is people who work as a research analyst. I can also search for jobs, so using the same term. So who is hiring for research analysts at the moment? So the Bank of Queensland is hiring right now for a customer research analyst. Did I know that? No, I didn't. You can do this by date, by experience level, by different company. It's really handy. Who is posting about research analyst roles or being a research analyst. That could be interesting as well. Who are the companies who speak about research analyst, or where are the groups? These are maybe companies that I want to follow or already following. So if I was looking for a person, potentially, I could say, I want to look for somebody who is working at Deloitte. You can do it that way. It's a really fabulous tool. This is turning into a LinkedIn workshop, and I don't want it to, but I just want you to be aware how simple it is to get through. So just a couple of little housekeeping things. This is where you're going to find the resources once this workshop is finished. It'll be in the QUT Blackboard under GRED, so under career development, and then workshop resources. I will send you the link though, but there's so much that's available under career development. I'd love you to have a proper look. Now, a few things that are coming up. 14th of November, I run my research career community. I'd love to have you there. The 24th of November, I'm running career competitive skills for employability. What are the skills you need to testify and show evidence of to be the most employable? And on the 6th of December, for any of you who are interested in self-sourcing an HDR internship, Susan and Simon will be delivering that workshop on the 6th of December. And 22nd, I think it is, of November, which is one that I've left off, is the Campus Radar introduction with the director of Campus Radar, who happens to have PhD in neuroscience. And now she's running a platform, a recruitment platform for academics. It's pretty cool. So I've given you lots to think about, I hope. So Joe's asked, it's great, what are the negatives? The negatives, I'm assuming that you were back in the LinkedIn conversation of how to be open to recruiters. Yeah. Negatives of being on the LinkedIn program at all is that you have to be willing to share some of your personal information so that people can find you. You have to be willing to put either a phone number or an email address so that you can be contacted. If you are not willing to do that, it's probably not your platform. LinkedIn also requires you to build a profile, of course. What I would suggest that you start with, obviously it's your basic resume. I wouldn't go on LinkedIn. If you are looking for an industry role, I wouldn't go into a huge amount of depth about your research specificity. Only from the perspective of how would I explain this to a layperson? I would be focused on your skills and where you've built them. So what I would start with LinkedIn is the about section, because that's the first piece they read. 3 sentences. Who are you? As in, what's your identity? Who are you? What are you looking for? So what can you do? And then what would you bring? 3 sentences. The Campus Radar profile asks you the same thing. My suggestion is write it once and duplicate it. Let's keep things simple. I also would encourage you, not necessarily, you don't have to. Mine is very different. But if you wanted to use those same 3 sentences as your professional profile on an industry resume, again, you've done 1 piece of writing and you've already spread it across 3 areas. So ORCID, for those of you who aren't aware, is basically a research repository. It's a researcher's profile. So if your aim is to work in academia or in academic adjacent roles, like the CSIRO or at a research institute, not necessarily as a sessional academic or a teaching academic, then having a list of your ORCID publications is really, really valuable. It is usually not used as a search when people are looking for someone with expertise. They won't be on ORCID to say, oh, we were looking for someone like you. What they will use ORCID for is to validate this is a genuine qualification that you have. This is a genuine publication that you made. So for industries that value publications, ORCID is really valuable. For most industry roles, as I said, it's more about your outcomes rather than your outputs, and ORCID is basically a collection of your outputs. So for an academic role, really powerful. For an industry role, probably not so much. Right, how are we going? Do we have any other questions? As we finish up, again, just add them into chat or unmic and ask me a specific one. Well, if we've come to the end of our workshop, yes, I'm hoping I have given you some food for thought. I'm hoping that I've given you some tools and some concepts, some language to start your search. I am looking forward to seeing you at my next set of workshops or on LinkedIn, whichever one is faster. And I hope you have a brilliant afternoon. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I would really be grateful for you to provide some feedback on this workshop. And don't forget, if you came in a little late and you didn't write your student ID into the chat, could you please do that to make sure that you're allocated as an attendee? Thank you so much. Ah, beautiful. Thank you. It's been good to see you.